Home field advantage? Question mark. And the Michigan game, does it mean nothing or does it mean and tell us everything? Buckeyes live right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you being here. And of course, here we are. We've arrived at the first 12-team college football playoff. We've been anticipating this for a long, long time and what these matchups could look like. And so it's Ohio State against the SEC. You always have to add that when there's an SEC team involved. I think that that's obligatory, that they are from the SEC. So, of course, it just means more. So it's not just a playoff game, folks. It means more. Whatever that more is, we will determine that, I guess, in the next 60 minutes. Tony Girdman right next to me, Buckeye Huddle. And then, of course, the podcast is Buckeye Weekly that you want to check out with Tony and crew. We've got Steve Hellwagon, Bucknuts 247 Sports. Guys, how we doing?
Good.
We're doing great.
The draw is the 8-9 game, and so Ohio State was in place over Tennessee to keep that home field advantage of the 8-9, and that's been one of my talking points through this entire deal is that 8-9 game could possibly be argued, but if anything, for the Buckeyes, I would argue, and I'm trying not to sound like a homer, but I think it's a pretty ironclad argument that they kind of got screwed. What do you think, Tony?
Well, I think yes, but also this was the committee trying to protect conference championship games and rewarding the teams that made the conference championship games. And by not dropping Penn State below Ohio State and not dropping some of the others and keeping SMU in there, they rewarded the teams that made the conference championship games. And that was one of my questions going into this season is how will you punish the losers of the conference championship games, and will you keep them above the teams that didn't make it? And turns out, yeah, they will. And I don't know how long that's going to last, but it was clear that they rewarded the teams that made those games, and the teams that didn't, they didn't earn their way into that kind of respect. And so the losses that they did have cost more than the losses that the teams that made the conference championship games had. And they didn't even allow Penn State to get to Ohio State's comparison because then you get to the head-to-head. So I think they trying to protect the sanctity of those championship games is the way I viewed it.
Yeah, they didn't penalize any of the losers. I mean, SMU still got in, obviously, despite losing. And the seeds, or at least the seed for Penn State, really didn't change a whole lot by losing. And they played a competitive game, too. I think what's lost in the idea of just simply saying, oh, they protected the teams that played was that all three games were very close and went down to the wire. Had one of the teams gotten blown out in one of the three marquee games, then I think you'd have a case, certainly to downrate, the loser, but that really wasn't the case. There's a lot that's being said and a lot that we can say about this. I think that Penn State got a better draw than Oregon or Ohio State in the final analysis of this. They've got an easier path to the semifinals than either of the teams that beat them. And I just don't think that that's necessarily right. But when you're doing it this way and you're holding back certain seeds for certain teams that, finished 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th in the final poll to be a top 4 seed, it's going to get screwed up. And so I think that's what we're seeing here. And I think that I know that Josh Pate, who puts stuff on our platform at CBS and 24/7, came out with his thought about it. I don't know what everybody's thought about this is. There's a lot of people that want to abolish the conference championship games and just add an extra layer to the playoff or make it a full 16-team playoff maybe. I don't know. But I tend to doubt that that's going to happen. I just think that the money involved with those conference championship games is too much. Both the SEC and the Big Ten games drew over 10 million viewers, and that's not an insignificant number of viewers in this day and age that you can bank on every year with this format. So I don't know what to say. I'm not on the committee. I'm not an athletic director. I'm not a conference commissioner. I know the SEC's pissed that Alabama didn't get in, and they're threatening to do away with future marquee non-conference games, forgetting the fact that they'd be in if they hadn't lost to shit-ass Oklahoma or shit-ass Vanderbilt. So, that's a you problem. That's not a us problem.
Well, there's also the fact that Alabama has non-conference games scheduled against Ohio State coming up, and the SEC and the Big Ten are going to get into a deal here where they're probably playing non-conference games against each other. And again, most SEC teams only play 9 Power Four opponents anyway, whereas most, like Big Ten teams, not most, but they're playing 9 conference games, and then if they're playing 3 non-conference games, usually 1 is against Power Four opponents. So, and I'm sure the same thing is the case in the ACC, where they're playing more Power Four opponents than the SEC anyway, and the SEC still wants to complain about it. But I do the Josh Pate thing, and I don't know if you've seen this, Mark. His idea, and it's basically you get rid of conference championship games. You decide your conference champions based on standings, like the Big Ten has done forever, and then basically your top 2 teams are in for the Big Ten and the SEC, and I don't know if anybody else gets the automatic bids. But then teams 3 through 6, 3 plays 6, 4 plays 5 for play-ins into the playoffs. And so you would eliminate the conference championship game, 1 game, but you'd be adding 2 play-in games. And so you'd have more inventory. The ratings would probably be not a conference championship game, but they'd be basically expanding the playoffs with games like that. And I think the way you've seen coaches, especially in the SEC, just really, especially Kirby, not want to have anything to do with the conference championship game situation anymore. There's some benefit to it. There's not this overarching great benefit to it. So like there's this groundswell to can we get rid of them? But if you get rid of them, you have to replace them with something. And so you've got to come up with that. But the importance of winning the conference now is kind of like, it's about as important as the winning the Big Ten basketball championship to the March Madness committee. Like they don't care about that tournament at all. They don't care about that Sunday game at all. And I think you're seeing a lot of coaches and administrators starting to feel the same way about that extra game of the conference championship game.
So I'll try to run down my bullet points that are compiling in my head as you guys continue to talk. I guess number 1 would be, I'm not going to hold the committee responsible for the format. As long as they rank the teams correctly, it's going to fall the way it does in regards to these seedings, and Penn State having the easiest path and all of that. They're not responsible for that. They can only rank the teams, and then the seedings play out the way that they do. So they didn't build the format necessarily, but they ranked the teams. So I think they ranked them outside of Ohio State and Penn State, which brings me to my next point. And for anybody that watches me on a regular basis, I apologize. You can mute me for the next minute. So for me, it's a 3-pronged argument for Ohio State. It's not just head-to-head, but that's point number 1, head-to-head on the road in a extremely competitive game, but where Ohio State was decidedly the better team. Not a last-second kick, not a deflected pass in the end zone, decidedly the better team. Point number 2, the Oregon comparison. And in regards to the conference championship games, if we want a, let's say, situation where we're protecting the conference championship game losers, fine. We're protecting their playoff spot. But I don't think we should be protecting their ranking or their seeding. Therefore, Ohio State plays as close a game as you can humanly play. Whether you want to say it was 1 second away, they're in field goal range, they're a pass interference call away, all those things. That you cannot play a game as close as they did on the road at Autzen Stadium, as opposed to Penn State playing a very entertaining game. I enjoyed it. It was fun. It had a lot of offense, but they were at arm's length the entire game. 1 score, 2 scores, back to 1, back to 2. Never seriously threatened Oregon. There was at no point in that game I thought Penn State was going to win that game. So no comparison between their performances against Oregon. And point number 3, not Penn State's fault, but they didn't play Indiana, the next best team in the conference, and Ohio State beat them by 23 points. there's no comparison between the two teams' resumes.
I completely agree, and that was also something I said before as well, where you can punish a conference championship loser and still keep them in. The punishment would be knocking them out of the playoffs entirely. You should still be able to seed them where you think they are and not reward them when we know how uneven conference schedules are and the way that some teams get to avoid, like Texas not getting a single top 25 win, but they were all the way up towards the top of the ranking. So how far can you actually move them? And so, yeah, I'm with you that if it's almost like they just chose not to look at it. And that's, because if you do, then I don't know how you can put Penn State ahead of Ohio State. And yeah, that 6th seed, that path for the 6th seed looks so much better than the 8, the 9, or even the 1. You got to feel bad for Oregon and that, they don't have the easiest road either. But in order for Ohio State to win this national championship, they're probably going to have to beat Oregon on the West Coast after beating Tennessee at home, beat Oregon out on the West Coast, beat Texas and Dallas, beat Georgia in Atlanta if Georgia can make it. So there won't be any totally easy roads, but there are so much easier roads, and Penn State certainly has one.
My question for the committee would have been this: did you watch the conference championship games? And if their response would have been yes, of course we did, my response would be, you shouldn't have watched the conference championship games. You shouldn't even know what the score of the games are. All you need to know is who won the games, because you're not counting these games against the losers. So you shouldn't have watched them. You shouldn't even know what the scores are.
Yeah, and that's where I go back to the selection committee of the basketball when they don't watch the Sunday Big Ten championship game. They've already got all the seating set because it's so late in the day. And yeah, that's interesting. If it doesn't matter, their performance doesn't matter, then why even watch it?
Or even know what the scores were. And then my final point would be Matt Zemek, Trojans Wire. He does a show with me, Big Ten football on Mondays. His suggestion was, in response to the Josh Pate suggestion, which I'm not familiar with, but Matt said this. I don't know if this is well thought out in regards to this would apply to any year, but he said, and this makes sense to me. If there's a conference champion based on the regular season standings, like an Oregon, who has a better record than everybody else, then give them the conference championship. They are the conference champion. Don't force them to play the bubble teams in that conference. So Texas won the SEC, Ole Miss and Alabama play a game, I guess. I don't know if it was completely vetted through, but it was an interesting concept to a certain extent.
Oh, Jesus. I mean,
too much to think about.
Yeah. I mean, in a perfect world, there would have been a play-in game this week with SMU playing Alabama. That would have solved all the issue. Have a first two, and create some urgency for the last spot. No one in the history of the sport, nobody has ever been worried that the number 13 team or the number 12 team didn't get a fair shot, the national championship. So just, just go on. I mean, go play in the Outback Bowl or wherever they sent them, whatever. It's whatever. Who cares at this point?
Well, and I've said it before, but everybody has agreed to this plan. So even the teams that are the 13th and the 14th and the 15th now agreed to this, and we're looking forward to it and have accepted it. So we're all in the same sandbox. Sometimes you end up with a cat turd.
Yeah, win your games.
There you go. Win the games. That brings us to Ohio State and Tennessee. One game in the history of these two schools against each other. Of course, Peyton Manning, Eddie George, a rain-soaked Tampa Stadium.
I was there.
They called it at that point.
There.
Yeah,
they were having a pep rally. They were having a pep rally. They were having a pep rally at Disney World the day before, and they canceled it because it started pouring down rain about 2:00 the day before, and then it never stopped. It rained all night, all day, through the end of the game, was still pouring down rain the next day at 4:00 when the game was over. So one of the most miserable game situations that I can recall in my time, covering Ohio State. And Tennessee won the game 20-14. It was alleged that they had spikes that were too long. The NCAA rule was half-inch spikes, and John Cooper somehow saw that they were wearing spikes that were 3/4 of an inch long, and he was giving Philip Fulmer heck about it after the game. And the officials, told Coop they didn't have a ruler, so that was it. Ohio State with Eddie George and won the Heisman Trophy that year, but ended the year with 2 losses, one to Michigan and one to Tennessee. And Peyton Manning wasn't quite Peyton Manning yet. He was only a sophomore, I think, at that point. And, I got to see him after the game. He was down there signing autographs for people, and he was definitely already a celebrity, that's for sure, at Tennessee. And it was a rare matchup. Both teams were ranked number 4 in the AP poll, but you didn't have the bowl assignments the way they would become in the next several years, where the second place teams in these high-powered conferences would still get to go to a Sugar Bowl or a Fiesta Bowl or something like that. They didn't have it quite set up that way. So neither of these teams won their respective conference championships, and yet they got sent to the Citrus Bowl as opposed to one of the major bowls and got to play each other. And just unfortunate that it wasn't on what's normally a sunny day down there in Orlando for these games. It was as bad a rainstorm as I could ever recall from one day to the next.
I'm going to kick myself for not remembering who the Ohio State wide receiver was who caught a pass around the 25-yard line on the final drive of the game as Ohio State was moving the ball down the field. They were in scoring range, and somebody stripped him of the ball, and that was the ball game.
Yeah.
I can't remember who that was.
Well, I don't know if it was Terry Glenn or Demetrius Stanley. It
wasn't a frontline guy.
Yeah,
it was
not sure.
But there was also a goal line stand in that game where Ohio State had it like 1st and goal inside the 5 and kept ramming it straight ahead and got stuffed at the goal line. And close game against Tennessee, 2 elite teams, and that was the only time.
Yep, no doubt about it.
So here we are, and I'm sure you'll do a lot more work on Tennessee moving forward, but the Buckeyes are a pretty substantial favorite in this one.
Yeah, I DVR'd every school under the sun, but with the exception of one, and that was Tennessee. And why I didn't DVR the Tennessee-Georgia game is beyond me. I've got Georgia, Alabama. I've started to delete the Alabama ones because they're not going to play Alabama this year. Let's see, Texas. I've got, several games of all these teams, but I don't have anybody playing Tennessee, and I know they're all on YouTube, so I can call them up. But as you say, I haven't really delved too deep into it yet. Obviously, it was 2 years ago they really kind of struck gold there with Hendon Hooker and Josh Heupel. He's in his 4th year now as the Tennessee coach and has done a really nice job, kind of brought some stability to a program that when Philip Fulmer left in the early 2000s, and then he kind of became the AD, it became a revolving door of coaches, probably 3 or 4 of them in the interim. I know Butch Jones was there for a while. Derek Dooley was there for a while. Whoever was there before Heupel, who kind of got him in some hot water with the NCAA, who he was like a hotshot assistant. Pruitt, is that who it was? Jeremy Pruitt. Yeah. So those are 3 names right there that I know off the top of my head, and there may be another one who was mixed in there somewhere. And so Heupel comes in and really, as I said, brought some stability to the program, and now they're beating teams in the SEC who they hadn't beaten in like 15 or 20 years. Like Florida had dominated their rivalry. Georgia probably in recent years had dominated their rivalry. Alabama obviously had dominated their rivalry up until, 2 years ago, Tennessee finally broke through and beat them at home. like the first time in forever. And then Tennessee beat them again this year, obviously for probably their marquee win of the year. Lost to Georgia, lost to Arkansas. Otherwise, they would have played probably for the SEC championship. So, or been right in that mix to play for it. So, very formidable team. And I think that they're looking for that kind of breakthrough win over an Ohio State to catapult their program to another level. Obviously, that would put them in the Final Eight and get them to go play Oregon. Ohio State, on the other side, we've talked about the last 2 weeks. I mean, to lose to Michigan in the fashion that they did was embarrassing, unconscionable, unbelievable. Still can't believe it, weeks later. And, I probably brought this up on the show last time. People would stop me and say, do you think they would fire Ryan Day if they lost to Michigan for the 4th straight time? I said, there's no way they're going to lose to Michigan. Michigan's terrible. It never even crossed my mind that it was a possibility. And yet, they go out on that field and Michigan pulled it off. And, Ohio State now is in a position where they have a chance to redeem themselves by making a playoff run. And I kind of said that Ryan Day, he's starting at ground zero. It's like he's 0-0 again, and he needs to start winning games. And if he wins one game, he'll bring back 25% of the fan base. If he wins 2 games in the playoff, he'll bring back 50%. If he wins 3 games, he'll bring back 75%. And if he wins them all, he'll bring back 100% of the fans who really matter. Anybody who's not brought back, if that's not even a word, not brought back by a national championship run, as you outlined, which would be epic. I mean, to play the four of the top 6 teams over the next, or 7 teams over the next 3-4 weeks, whatever it is, and beat them, that would be a Herculean feat. And, we're predicting, we're hoping, we're looking at all this for a team that was just miserably awful, at least offensively, and on special teams against Michigan. So you better hope they put this 3-week window to good use and get their football straightened out over there at the Ohio State College, because Tennessee's coming to Columbus looking to win a big game, no doubt.
Our guy, David Greenshield, that was the name that was eluding me. Old number 12 there, Buster Tillman.
Buster Tillman.
The guy that fumbled the football against Tennessee. Yes, I should have. I had Buster in my mind, and I had number 12, and I couldn't come up with it. Thank you, David. My snapshot of Tennessee kind of looks like this. Of course, they get the hotshot 5-star quarterback. He's a freshman, Nico Iamaleava. They kind of protect him. I looked at his game log. He's only thrown the ball 30 times twice, because they got Dylan Sampson, 1,500-yard back, 22 touchdowns in the backfield, and they don't give the ball to too many other guys. And they don't have a wide receiver core that's in the Ohio State League, but it's really good. Squirrel White, Brew McCoy, Chris Brazzell, the Tulane transfer comes to mind. Yeah, really good offensive line with a All-America center, Cooper Mays. And the defenses are ranked, although Ohio State's elevated to the number 1 spot in yards per play, scoring, total yardage. Tennessee's right there in the top 7 or 8 in most of these stats categories. And even though the passing game on the offensive side is not threatening from a yardage standpoint, it's like top 10 or 15 in terms of pass efficiency. So, Tony, have you started to do your homework on the Vols?
Yeah, I watched the Alabama game. We dropped a podcast on that yesterday, what we learned from watching that. I watched the Georgia game. That'll drop today. And I've got, all of these notes from these 2 games. And I have to remind myself of what I have seen. And one of the things that I saw in both games is that teams throw the ball much more than they run it against Tennessee. And that's partly because I guess Tennessee's got a pretty good run defense, but also because they view the pass defense of Tennessee the easier path to success. And Alabama threw it 45 times, and Carson Beck threw it, I think, 40 something and threw for 350 some yards against them and a couple of touchdowns. And he also ran the ball back, ran it a few times. So that's kind of one of the things I've seen from Tennessee's defense. The offense, Nico Iamaleava we'll all eventually get it all right when they're done playing.
Like
But
Uyambalele.
yeah,
It took forever.
but he will run as well. He in those games, he was carrying it 5-6 times a game for 8-9 yards a pop, and that's scrambling, that's keeping it on reads, that's just evading pressure and making plays. And he's a long strider. He's 6'6". He'll get some yards. But Georgia sacked him 5 times. They pressured him quite a bit. And so you look at Ohio State. Well, look at what did Georgia do that was successful, and try to maybe replicate some of that with the multiple fronts and the blitzes that they have. Defensively, I didn't see a lot of blitzing from Tennessee, and they just do the 4-man front. They'll run odd fronts, but they'll generally have 4 guys up there, and they've got some good athletes. They've got a good corner. Safeties are up and down. One of the safeties, Andre Turntine, former Buckeye, was there for a year. He's there starting kind of free safety, field safety. And Will Brooks is their other safety, who was really good against Alabama and not great against Georgia. The tight ends ate up the Tennessee secondary and their defense and the linebackers. So that's some of my thoughts. I haven't really seen much from the linebackers themselves from Tennessee. Like, they haven't really stood out to me yet. And they've got a corner, I think, Ricky Gibson, that teams will pick on, and Ohio State will continue to pick on him as well, I believe.
So the scary matchup here is the Tennessee defensive line led by James Pierce, who's probably going to be a top 5 pick in the NFL draft, against a makeshift offensive line for Ohio State that Ryan Day is still throwing out names like Luke Montgomery in particular and others to say we're going to throw something together or make adjustments. So that's what concerns me first and foremost.
I think they will start the same 5 guys who started the Michigan game. They're going to tell you they're going to tinker and that everything's on the table. But I would be literally shocked in 3 weeks, 2 weeks of prep, whatever it is. They practiced a couple times last week, but I would be shocked if they make any changes and put somebody in there who has never started a game. That just doesn't make any sense to me at this time. I think that line was very good pass protection. There were no sacks by Michigan on Howard. He got dinged up when he scrambled and the safety lowered the boom on him. But I would be shocked. These guys are so conservative with how they do business that I just can't see a replacement at this 11th hour that you would put out there for the first time ever. That just runs counter to anything these guys would have ever done.
It just depends on, and they did it against Missouri in the Cotton Bowl, and we saw the results. But it comes down to whether or not Carson Hinsman can be consistent enough with the snaps and how they feel about that. And let's not pretend that Tager Shabola has been fantastic the last, the entire season, frankly. But he was splitting reps with Austin Searveld for a while, and I think there is enough time to see if Josh Padilla can be the guy at center, redshirt freshman. They don't want to do that, but you've got to put your best 5 out there. I've been told once Seth McLaughlin went down, there was serious consideration for Padilla, and that there are some that felt like he would have been the best option at center. So will they revisit that? We'll talk today, maybe again sometime soon, maybe probably next week. I don't know if we're going to get the assistant coaches like we had hoped this week. And they would just tell us that, well, we're just looking into everything. And that's one of the things that Ryan Day said. Like, we're even looking into, moving Donovan Jackson back inside. There's no way. So when they say they're looking at everything, that's not, cursory, because you want to leave no stone unturned. But I don't know what I expect from the offensive line, and whether or not it's Josh Padilla at center and Carson Hinsman at left guard and maybe Austin Searveld or Luke Montgomery or Tager Shabola at right guard, or if they just roll some of those guys and give several guys an opportunity. It's not the best time to do that in a playoff game, but they've got to figure it out, and they can't just assume that everything they've done against Michigan will be fine. But if what if the same 5 that went against Michigan have had the best 2 weeks of prep, then you go with them.
Got an Ole Miss channel and an Ole Miss show. It's our next one up here Wednesday, 2 p.m. Eastern time. Actually, I lied. We're doing a portal update at noon right after this show. We decided to give you the portal update each and every day. Leanne Herring and myself, noon Eastern time, and then the Ole Miss show on the Ole Miss channel Wednesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern time. So the next concern is obviously what's going on between the ears of coaches and players. And I mentioned home field advantage as well, or home field period, and whether that's an advantage or otherwise off the top, because if they're down by a touchdown or 10 points in the second quarter, I don't know if that's going to be much of a home field advantage. So I'm asking the impossible question, but what's going on between the ears of these players? Because if you take the Michigan game off the season, which I know it's the most important game of the season, the season pretty much went as expected. Sure, they lost at Oregon, but very understandable. One letdown game against Nebraska. That happens to everyone. They're sitting at 10-1. They played this season that was pretty much expected of them. Elite defense. Will Howard playing a game manager role really well. They in terms of the nuts and bolts and what they presented on paper, they are entering this playoff as expected, aside from 3.5 hours against Michigan.
Yeah. Well, in a football vacuum, the Michigan game is not as important as it used to be because it does not determine as much as it used to. And you say it's the most important game. We always say it's the most important game. The most important game is the Tennessee game right now because you're in the playoffs now. So the most important game is the next game. And coaches always say that, but now it's true. Now it's real because if you win this one, guess what? You get to play another one. So this is the most important game. And if you can't get on board with that and you're just, you're such a sad sack that you can't get off the floor after being beaten by Michigan, then you're as soft as everybody has said. Like you're as soft as the people that call you soft that makes you angry. So if you can't get up for this one, and I always go back, and I've said this before, to the 2015, after the loss to Michigan State, Ohio State goes to Michigan and beats up on the Wolverines. And Taylor Decker said it in the postgame after that game, that if we hadn't come out and played like this, then all of the talk about our culture and the brotherhood would have been fake. And so, they showed that it wasn't. This was a call to basically their manhood and their brotherhood, and they stepped up. And so if you're, yes, you're not going to get over losing to Michigan in a week. It took them weeks to get over the loss to Oregon, but you don't really have weeks now. Now it's real. You've got to get over it. You've got to move on. And Tennessee is the most important game this season. And if you think it's not, then you're going to lose it.
Kind of hate to attach the history to what's going on in the here and now, because I don't think losing a Sugar Bowl game to Alabama in 1978 affects what's going to happen here in 10 days. But at the same time, this is about the one blemish on the history of this program that is impossible to defend in any way. And it's, of course, 2-13 against this conference. I can't defend it. It gets thrown in my face. It's the one thing I can defend. Everything else, I can talk about national championships and Big Ten championships that are actually more than Michigan since Ohio State joined the conference, folks. Things like that if you take college football history into context, I don't even think Michigan's their history even compares to Ohio State's. They get run off the board in every category post 1915. So I don't even want to debate that. But it's difficult, and I know these are isolated games. And you can't take Iowa's record, which I assume is about 500 against the SEC, and say, wow, Iowa fans have bragging rights over Ohio State fans because we play well against the SEC. Well, no, you're playing Mississippi State and you're playing borderline top 25 teams, when Ohio State, of course, even comparing their matchups against Penn State or Michigan, are far more difficult. They are playing almost exclusively national championship caliber teams in the last 20 years, but it's still losing football games 13 out of 15 times.
Well, Mark, I think your mistake there is that you don't count all of the SEC teams. You only count teams while they were in the SEC. And once Missouri and Texas A&M joined the SEC, Ohio State took over ownership, had a winning record. I believe they are like 14-1 and 1 against those two teams. Until this last loss against Missouri, they were 4-0 against Texas A&M all time, and they were like 10-1 and 1 against Missouri. So that washed away that 2-13 right then. As soon as they added those two
Oklahoma.
teams, I haven't gotten to that part yet, Mark.
That kind of hurts it. Okay,
but still, it is something. It's the cross to bear for a lot of Big Ten fans and Ohio State fans. Certainly, that there was this you couldn't get over the hump. Like Jim Tressel had issues, and then you finally beat Arkansas, top 10 Arkansas, but it's just Arkansas. It's not LSU, it's not Florida, it's not Alabama, and then it gets taken away from you. So yes, you got to go back to the John Cooper ownership of LSU. Maybe is that because it certainly was no Alabama, no Auburn, no Tennessee, but they did get good old LSU a couple times, or at least once.
Steve's remaining silent on the topic.
I'm back in. My internet bleeped out for a minute there, but that's part and parcel. And they've always lumped these playoff games, considered them as part of your bowl record. So do they now have to go forward and call it bowl/postseason record? Is that what they're going to call it? Because this is a postseason game, and yet it's being played at the campus site. So I don't know if they're going to count this toward their bowl record. I assume so. But at any rate, their Ohio State's bowl record and Ohio State's bowl record against SEC and Ohio State's record against SEC teams and Ohio State's record against Tennessee, all that needs spiffed up and would look really good with a bright green and red, Christmas present W under the tree for Christmas. Boy, it would make a fun holiday season for everybody if they could win this game and then go into the Rose Bowl on January the 1st, go out there and play against an Oregon team that they know they can play toe-to-toe with. So I want to see Ohio State come out and play its best football game. That's what matters. My God, all this angst and all this whatever, it's like, either you are one of the top teams in the country or you just, quite frankly, you weren't. And right now it's leaning more toward you weren't, but we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, you can change the entire narrative of the season or start changing the narrative by just being as good as people thought you were supposed to be and showing it against a Tennessee team that frankly has not lived up to, I think, the hype there this year. They've struggled on offense at times. Dylan Sampson is very, very good as a running back. And they'll be patient. Like it's one of these weird things. They run a lot of tempo. They'll snap the ball with 30 seconds on the clock, but they'll just continue to run the ball. It's like this up-tempo patience where the patience of Michigan won them that game, along with Ohio State's turnovers and giving them scoring drives of 2 and 3 yards. But Tennessee will just continue to run the ball, and try to pick up some short third downs with Nico, whether running or throwing. So they will be patient as they are being hyperactive, trying to get this run established. And their receivers are okay, maybe in the realm of Indiana, maybe a step better. It just depends on the day. And so the Sampson is clearly, if you stop him, then you've got a pretty good chance. If you don't, then we've seen like he's run on everybody, and Tennessee has still lost. So like stopping him is the key, but even if you don't, that doesn't mean you're going to lose to Tennessee. And I think the weather is kind of overblown, but there was an interesting story, I think, in the Alabama game or the Georgia game. I think it was the Alabama game where the heated benches there for the receivers broke down. So like they had to give the heated bench or the heaters from the running backs to the receivers. And so that, because it was so cold, the game time temperature was 55. And it was a daytime game, if I recall. So if they need heated benches at 55 and they're struggling, then, it's going to be, 25, 30 at kickoff for this one. So it'll be interesting to see. But also, Ohio State didn't hold up in the cold either. So I don't know that it's this huge advantage for Ohio State.
Yeah, 0-1 in games played at 30 degrees right now. So
yeah, it's the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I mean, come on, what are we talking about here? Miami Dolphins.
All right. Well, we will have more on the Vols and the Buckeyes next week. Folks, we appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. We'll take your comments and questions. We appreciate the super chat contributions. You can also hit us up at Venmo, PayPal, and Cash App, and that's actually a more effective way. Just let us know it's for the Ohio State channel. So we've got some transfer portal news, nothing too devastating by any stretch. A handful of players. Jaden Ballard's a name that obviously had expectations attached to it at one point. Devin Brown's the guy that, who knows, may show up at a Big Ten school near you. I don't know. And Tony, any one that stands out or any missing parts that are going to be missed?
Well, frankly, as Ryan Day talked about, the guys that are in the portal, it's going to be a case by case on whether if anybody's staying with the team. Devin Brown will be staying with the team. Like Gabe Powers is on a lot of special teams, and I think they would like for him to stay, but we haven't received necessarily word on what he's going to do. I don't know if Steve knows that, but there's other guys. Jaden Ballard is involved with special teams, but Steve, what's the saying on playing time?
Playing time for all these guys will be unaffected. They were not playing at Ohio State, and they're, weren't going to play at Ohio State in the future, by and large, most of them. To me, Powers is a middle linebacker, and it looks like that's going to go to Reese for next year. And so I didn't really see a clear path for him. Devin Brown must believe that Julian Sayin is better than him, even though Ryan Day continues to put Devin Brown in the game first before Julian Sayin. That's the only thing I can think of, is that perhaps they've just told him flat out, yeah, we're using you this year, but you'd have to beat out Julian, and he's already 2 steps ahead of you, for next year. So that just seems to make more sense. Julian's got a higher ceiling, I think, than Devin Brown would have, and I think that fans you put Devin Brown in the game and the results are usually the same. He comes back 1 for 3 for 8 yards, and another underwhelming performance is what everybody always puts on the message board after every blowout game. He's never gotten in there and let him write, 5 of 6 right down the field for a touchdown. It's very rare that he's done something like that, late in the game. So, it has happened once or twice, but not on any kind of regular occurrence. So, and again, if you're judging who's going to be the quarterback next year based off garbage time, that doesn't tell you anything either. But yeah, he's interesting. Jaden Ballard, unfortunately, could never crack the rotation at wide receiver, even when guys were hurt. They just didn't play him. Gabe Powers, some of these other guys. Kojo Antwi, just never was promising in the spring, but just never came through in any kind of a meaningful way in the fall. So I don't know. I don't think they'll miss any of these guys. Maybe if there's injuries at quarterback, they'd miss Devin Brown, but I just say, meh, whatever. They're going to have a constant churn of personnel, and if you ain't starting, then you may as well be looking around.
And Devin Brown has competed for the job twice and lost it, and he's been through this before, so that's not a surprise at all that he will be looking elsewhere. And then that 2022 receiver class now is all transferred out. That was Caleb Brown, Caleb Burton, Keon Grays, and Kojo Antwi, and those 4 guys produced a total of, I believe, 3 catches for 22 yards. So that was a complete miss by Brian Hartline in a recruiting class, and that's going to be those guys would be seniors, 4th-year guys next year, and they're not there. And so, they've got to be Ohio State's been top heavy at receiver because of that class, basically, and they're going to be top heavy again next year. And we'll see if any of the true freshmen or the redshirt freshmen can step up next year. And I did see somebody ask if we're going to ever hear David Greenshield, I think, asked if we're going to hear from Chip Kelly. We are contractually obligated to get the coordinators, I believe, next week. That is a college football playoff mandate for all teams in the playoffs. So
80% of the questions will be about Michigan and maybe
yeah.
5% about the Tennessee defense and so then on 3rd and 9 from your own 20-yard line, you ran a draw play with Henderson. What were you thinking there? And then in the red zone, you ran a throwback pass to the tight end. And then on 3rd and 9, ran Henderson up the middle for nothing, using the old Jim Tressel adage, don't doink up my 3, which then sailed wide left or wide right. I forget which one that was, but it sailed wide. And then you ran the option pitch for 20 yards and never went back to it. You ran the play where the tight ends got out in front of the running back on 4th down, and you pick up 15 yards and you never went back to it. You ran inside at the 2 All-American defensive tackles 20 times for 18 yards, and you kept going back to that.
Steve, we've moved on to Tennessee. We've moved on. We're on to Tennessee right now.
Was your quarterback concussed?
No.
Do you actually have medical personnel who look at these guys, or, what was going on? On the last series of the game, the quarterback looked like he wanted to be anywhere other than at Ohio Stadium on November the 30th, because he didn't throw the ball anywhere near any of the receivers on the last series that ended the game. And on. And I mean, you play 40 questions with that dude if you put him up there. Have you ever won anything anywhere? That'd be a question I'd ask the guy. Have you ever won anything anywhere? What have you ever won?
I would love to see a one-on-one with Steve and Chip Kelly.
It doesn't happen.
I want to be like Wilford Brimley in Absence of Malice. What did you have in mind after public service? And he says, I'm not resigning. He said, you aren't a presidential employee. I appointed you myself.
But the fact that we haven't talked to anybody, I mean, it's no different than we finally get to talk to Ryan Day for the first time after the Michigan game on signing day. And we talked to him for an hour, and it was the first 20 minutes were like, hey, can we just ask about just ask about recruiting, and then we will move on. And it was 20 minutes on recruiting, 40 minutes on Michigan. And that could have been done with, in the days before that, just like this, if we could talk to and maybe we'll still get the assistants this week and then move on to Tennessee. Like there's always going to be some Michigan fallout, the last loss or whatever, until we talk. Because even after the Oregon loss, we got to talk to both coordinators in Oregon at the game. After the game, immediately they talked. So you can kind of digest that. Right now, people are waiting, and we're waiting to, why were you thinking this? At least Ryan Day came out and was like, yes, we did all of these things incorrectly. We did them wrong. We should have done everything you're suggesting is what we should have done, and we need to do more of it next time. And yet it's still a topic because it's not just going to go away until we can actually exercise these demons and ask the questions.
Yeah, and the thing that sucks is with these new timing rules, with the clock running on first downs and clock starting after balls go out of bounds, is there's about 25% less football. So if you got 75 or 80 plays in the old days, you're down around 62, 63 plays now. And that's pretty consistent. Week after week after week, they're right in the low 60s. And your margin for error is much smaller when you're running, 20% fewer plays, and you can't get it wrong. You have to get it right. And when you don't get it right on one sequence of plays after another, after another, after another, you have left your defense out there to die. And that's what happened. You had a great defense that was doing the best it could possibly do to hold Michigan to as few points as it possibly could. And eventually they broke. And in the fourth quarter, they allowed Michigan to sustain drives because the offense kept going 3 and out and putting them back out there. And they eventually had breakdowns. And it was just like the game up in Ann Arbor last year, where they got it back with 7 or 8 minutes to go and took almost all the time off and kicked a field goal. it was almost identical to what happened last year. And then Ohio State had this frantic last drive, and McCord throws the interception at the end. Well, this time you get it back with 45 seconds left and no timeouts. And, the defense makes a critical mistake with 12 men on the field that cost them 20, 30 seconds probably of clock time. And it just it all steamrolls on you because you've left your defense out there. You've hung them out to dry. And, I said this last week, the touchdown that Michigan scored was gift wrapped by Ohio State. They threw the interception, returned to the 2-yard line, and they punched it in. You take that one out and the pick six by Penn State, and this defense has given up about 5 or 6 points over the last 6 games per game. And that should be good enough to win every game, but it wasn't this time. So it better be against Tennessee. I wonder if we're looking at a low-scoring game, a high-scoring game. Seems like 2 great defenses. It should be a low-scoring game. It was funny. The SEC game was a low-scoring game that went to overtime. The Big Ten game turned into this shootout with neither defense in the second half able to really stop the other. What do we foresee? Something in the middle? I don't know, like a 24-17 type game. I don't know what we're in for.
Yeah, Vegas is saying 27-20 based on the lines. I keep thinking like 24-20, 21-17, something like that. I'm not expecting any kind of Lucas Oil Stadium shootout. I did very poorly on taking the unders this past weekend. I'll just say that. But I think, I'm expecting low scoring ish. Because again, I don't expect Ohio State to be able to run the ball, and until they show me that they can do it, then I'm not going to expect them to do it. And this is an ongoing problem. They did it a little bit this season, and they were looking good. And then you could say, well, why aren't they rushing for 250 yards like they used to? And it kind of goes back to Steve's thing of 62 plays a game, when in 2018 they were averaging 82 plays a game, and yet this is a choice by Ryan Day and Chip Kelly to not run more plays because they're huddling and they could run more. I think Tennessee's averaging 74 plays per game this season, and they're moving kind of fast, and they're still only getting to what used to be average, 3 or 4 years ago because of the new rules, and games are shorter. We don't have 4-hour games anymore. You don't have 3 hours and 45 minutes, which used to be the norm. Now it's like 3:10, 3:15. They're getting those windows in. And a 3.5-hour game now is like it's a slog. There's a lot of commercials, and we know that. And sitting there for so many times this season for Fox games in a press box, I just kept thinking, how can this be an engaging television broadcast? How can this be fun? Because it just seems like it's so stilted and stunted. But yeah, all of these things I'm saying. I'm expecting a low score in this one. I think it's going to be the conditions. It's going to be cold, so how well do you deal with it? Ohio State did not deal with it well against Michigan. We'll see if they deal with it better in this one.
Yeah, I haven't brought this up, but the NFL went to that change with the play clock probably 20 years ago, and it eliminated all the vagaries of the putting the ball down and the referee blowing the ball into play and all that. It was just, when the previous play ended, you have X amount of time to run the next play. And, people forget it used to be the play ended, they'd throw the ball around a little bit and get it situated, and then the referee would blow his whistle and start, a 30-second clock or a 25-second clock. And they standardized all that to where there is no, this guy's a quick referee, he blows it in quick, and this guy's a slow referee and he blows it in slow. It just went to standardized 40 seconds. I have not had the opportunity to ask Ryan Day or Chip Kelly this. To get more plays back into these games, do you think it should go to 35? And boy, oh boy, would that put a lot of stress on the offensive coordinators to make snap decisions, and then the defensive coordinators to make snapper decisions, on the other side, because if you sub in 3 guys, you got to give the other team time to sub in 3 guys too, or whatever, to counter your substitutions. So I just wonder if shortening the play clock would put a few more plays back into the game. I don't know. I'm just kind of spitballing, but Yeah, we get a lot less football nowadays than we used to.
Yeah, I mean, and if the coaches are going to lament it, then move faster. That's all you got to do. I mean,
Yeah.
you're part of the problem is that you feel like we're going to do this. We're going to huddle. We're going to get the calls in through the communications, the comms, and things like that. You don't have to do that. It's a choice. And if you want more plays, then go get them, basically. And you're getting more plays back from your defense because they're getting 3 and out. So like you have more opportunities than say in 2018 when your defense was giving up a bunch of yards, and although some of those yards were 80 yards in one play. So again, same as a 3 and out, basically a few of those games.
Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
Tony, what's going on at Buckeye Weekly with the podcast and Buckeye Huddle?
Yeah, we just, as I said earlier, we dropped a what we learned from rewatching the Tennessee-Alabama game yesterday. I'll drop here later this afternoon the what we learned from watching the Tennessee-Georgia game. 2 vastly different games. One was a win for Tennessee. One was a loss for the Vols. And so we're going to also watch the Arkansas game, which is a loss, and then the Vanderbilt game, which was a win. That was the most recent game. So we'll get a good look at what Tennessee looks like coming into this game. And then, of course, Buckeye Huddle, you can find me there. Wrote about the freshman wide receivers coming in this recruiting class. And then we'll have the Big Ten schedule reveal or the Ohio State 2025 schedule reveal there as well later this afternoon and everywhere.
I failed to mention many times that Steve is not only at Bucknuts, of course, he's a senior Big Ten writer there. Illustrious position, Steve.
It sure is.
Here, of course.
Very thankless, I have to admit. Yeah. Like Tony said, kind of the quiet calm before the storm. I think we'll have a regular game week next week with interviewing the coaches and players, and should be a lot of fun, to go over and talk about the first time ever for a playoff game at Ohio Stadium. Not sure how the tickets have sold, other than to tell you my wife and her mom and dad are ticket holders, and they got an email after they purchased their tickets that there would be a second sale for season ticket holders who wanted to buy up to 6 more tickets each if they wanted. That tells me that the first wave, they wanted everybody in the first wave to buy by 4:00 on Monday, that they may not have sold everything. And I think it hurts them as well that students, the exams end this week and the students will not be on campus on Saturday, but that's really the same as it is at Penn State. I know that they were having, maybe a few problems selling tickets as well. And I don't know that Ohio State's having a problem selling tickets. I think, it seems to me that they are pricing these tickets as high as they can price them this week. And then my guess is next week, even Ohio State, if there's any inventory left, will price them to sell. So, waiting it out might be the best way to go. My wife and our in-laws, they got 1 pair for $220 each and 1 pair for $180 each, where they usually sit. And I know that when I clicked on the link for the up to 6 more, the lowest price on Ticketmaster, you had to go through Ticketmaster to get those, was $297. And I was like, you'll eat those. So, if you're willing to pay $300 to sit out in the cold to watch this game, you got more money and good sense than me. So, and it's a fine situation.
And we were told on Sunday or whatever, like lowest ticket prices will start at 100. I assume there's not many of those, and they're in very bad seats. And yet you're also
end zone.
Yeah, and you're also asking the fans to travel to all of these games as well. Like the home game should be I guess it is the cheapest because there's no flight for most people. But she whiz, is this? I know the allotments are uniform across all of the playoff teams. I don't know if the pricing is though.
Yeah, I don't know.
We have a transfer portal update coming up in just minutes over on the main channel. And then we've got the Ole Miss show at 2 Eastern on the Ole Miss channel. Right here at the Voice of College Football. We should be back here next Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern time with these two. But in the meantime, please subscribe and hit the bell for the notifications, because sometimes we've got to switch it up with scheduling conflicts. So please lock it in here at the Voice of College Football, Ohio State. Tony, appreciate you being here as always. Steve, appreciate you as well, making this thing go each and every week. We'll see everybody back here next Wednesday.